Listen, there's something important you need to hear, and honestly, it might shake the way you see yourself. You're not as hard to read as you think. Not to the people who truly matter. Not to those who actually pay attention. They have always known. They notice the way your voice changes when you lie. The way you laugh a little too hard when you feel invisible. The way you fill every silence because being quiet feels like being exposed. Someone has read you before, not with words, but with their attention. They saw the parts of you you've spent years trying to control, hide, or deny, and you didn't even notice, because no one teaches us that being truly seen isn't loud or dramatic. It's subtle, it's slow, it's surgical. The best readers don't blurt out what they know, they just never forget it. Enzy didn't teach us to read people so we could control them. Instead, he showed us what happens when we don't, when we confuse the mask someone wears for who they really are, when we fall in love with their performance, or worse, when we believe our own. This video isn't about mind tricks or body language hacks, it's about reading people on a level where the truth slips out in the pauses, the deflections, the tone underneath the tone. By the end, you won't just know how to read others, you're going to realize they've been reading you all along. This isn't the start of clarity. It's the end of hiding. Most people think they're hard to read. They wear confidence like armor. They speak with rehearsed certainty. They put forward polished identities, not because they're fake, but because they're scared to be real. But Enzy saw right through that. He believed people don't speak from truth, they speak from protection. Language wasn't made to reveal who we are. It was built to survive, to hide, to fit in. So when someone talks, you're not hearing their soul. You're hearing their mask explaining why it deserves to be accepted. We trust words too much, but truth leaks out in places people don't even realize. Intention. In silence, in moments when what they say doesn't match how they say it. Enzy didn't just study language, he studied contradictions. He believed truth is not in what's said, but what's avoided. Once you start seeing the world that way, everything becomes transparent. Take the confident guy who never stops talking. He's terrified of stillness. Or the perfectionist woman, obsessed with control. She's at war with the chaos inside her. The people who judge the loudest. They often hate in others what they can't face in themselves. People aren't mysteries, they're patterns. Patterns shaped by pain, by childhood, by fear, repeated so many times they become personality. And once you see people like that, there's no going back. What once seemed like arrogance becomes insecurity. What felt like rejection now makes sense as self-protection. What hurt you before, it just fits. You don't need a psychology degree to read people. Just stop believing what they say and start listening to what they show. Because Enzy was right, people aren't hiding from you, they're hiding from themselves. Every deep soul needs a mask. That's something Enzy believed, and, as with most of his insights, it wasn't just poetic, it was powerful, and maybe a little dangerous. Because once you really understand this, you stop trusting appearances. You stop assuming a smile means happiness. You stop confusing kindness with purity. You stop taking someone's presentation of themselves as proof that it's who they truly are. Masks aren't worn because people want to trick you. They're worn because the truth would cost too much. Way back in childhood, we learn this lesson. If you cry too much, you're called too sensitive. If you ask too many questions, suddenly you're too difficult. If you shine too brightly, then you're full of yourself. And so, we get taught to adjust. We water ourselves down, become more palatable, more accepted. We shapeshift into who we think the world will tolerate, and we call that personality. But Enzy saw deeper. He knew that what most people present as identity is really just a mask, not a lie, but a tool for survival. The deeper a person is, the more complicated their mask becomes. The more profound your spirit, the more threatening. Your true self can feel both to others and even to yourself. But here's the thing about masks, they always leak. No matter how carefully you craft them, they're never perfect. They slip in your body language, their stiff shoulders, the fidgety hands even when you think you're calm. They leak in your tone when your voice sounds too practiced, too hollow. They show up in discomfort when the topic gets too close, when the silence stretches just a little too long. Real identity doesn't live in what someone says, it lives in their contradictions. Take the person who claims everything's fine but clenches their jaw, or the one who constantly preaches positivity but can't be alone with their own thoughts, or the person insisting they don't care what others think while obsessively seeking approval. That's not lying, that's the mask slipping. If you pay attention, you'll see it every time. The real person is always living below the surface, raw, afraid, unfiltered. When you stop believing in masks, you don't just start reading other people, you start noticing how many masks you've worn, too. And that's when clarity truly begins. It's not about decoding others, it's about finally dropping the act yourself. Reading people isn't magic, it's not a sixth sense. It's not some mystical intuition that only a few people are born with. The people who are really good at reading others, they aren't special. They're just paying attention to what most folks ignore. They've trained their minds to spot the patterns that everyone else overlooks. Because honestly, people are more predictable than you think. It's not that we lack depth, it's that we're shaped by all the stories we never finished. Stories we keep acting out on repeat. You'll often hear people say, "I just have a feeling about that person." But skilled readers don't work off a vibe, they pay attention to data. Small, consistent signals that repeat across conversations, moods, and moments. It might start with a simple tone shift, the hesitation before agreeing to something they secretly hate, the pitch in someone's voice that rises when they're chasing confidence but not quite feeling it. Then you spot contradictions, like someone always saying they're so chill, but they just can't stop correcting everyone around them. Or the guy who claims he doesn't care about status, but somehow keeps dropping names. Maybe it's the person who brags about being independent, but always needs someone to validate them. None of that is random. Those are symptoms of something deeper. Then there's timing, the weird pause, when someone gets asked a personal question, the way they repeat themselves to fill silence. That sudden topic change when the conversation gets uncomfortably real. These aren't flaws. They're fault lines, the spots where the performance thins and the truth leaks out. The smartest readers aren't hunting for what's loud, obvious, or impressive. They're looking for what's off. They don't waste time picking apart details. They watch for those little emotional fingerprints, the things people don't even know they're doing. Clarity isn't magic, and it's not a feeling you just get. It's a discipline. It's learning to stay quiet long enough to notice what others are desperate to hide. As you practice, the world stops feeling like a series of random events. You stop getting blindsided. The masks everyone wears start to look transparent. And here's the real deal. These aren't just insights. They're weapons not to hurt other people, but to break free from your own illusions. Enzy didn't study people so he could judge them. He studied them so he could see through them. What he saw wasn't always pretty. First big truth, we all wear masks, not out of malice, but to survive. What you see in someone isn't their true self. It's just the version of them that survived rejection. And the louder someone's confidence, the more fragile their sense of self tends to be. Second, people hate in others what they refuse to face in themselves. If you're quick to mock arrogance, maybe you're not fully secure about your own worth. Quick to shame someone you think is fake, maybe you're struggling with your own authenticity. Criticism is so often just a mirror, angled at someone else to avoid seeing our own reflection. Third, silence speaks louder than words. Truth leaks out in the pauses, the sighs, the awkward smiles. When people dodge what reveals them, that avoidance is its own confession. Fourth, before people lie to others, they lie to themselves. They rehearse denial: I'm fine, I've let it go, I don't care. They believe these first, because they have to. Fifth, criticism isn't real analysis, it's autobiography. When someone can't stop talking about what's wrong with the world, they're really telling you what's wounded inside them. Every complaint comes from somewhere personal. Sixth, confidence is often just a costume hiding guilt. The people who seem the most composed are usually the ones scrubbing over something deep inside themselves they can't forgive. Seventh, exaggeration is a sign of insecurity. When someone says, "I never care," or "I'm always happy," or "I don't need anyone," the bigger the claim, the louder the fear it's hiding. Eighth, the hunger for control comes from inner chaos. The people who micromanage everything aren't strong, they're scared. Controlling others is just easier than facing their own mess. Ninth, loud morality often masks superiority. The louder someone shouts about being virtuous, the more they're hiding something behind it. True goodness is quiet. Performance is insecurity in disguise. 10th, people aren't afraid of getting hurt, they're afraid of being seen. Vulnerability isn't dangerous because of the pain. It's dangerous because it threatens the identity we've carefully built. Exposure feels like ego death. 11th, whatever someone defends the most is what they secretly doubt. When someone overexplains their beliefs, watch closely. They aren't trying to convince you, they're trying to convince themselves. 12th, the desperate need to be remembered comes from a fear of being forgotten. People who chase attention, who are the loudest in the room or the most visible online, they're not vain. They're terrified they don't matter. 13th, envy wears the mask of hate. People don't attack what they despise, they attack what they secretly desire. But don't believe they hate you, they believe they can't be you. 14th, no one speaks from logic, everyone speaks from pain. A person's beliefs aren't built on facts, they're built on scars. Every opinion has a wound beneath it. 15th, childhood doesn't disappear. It replays. The adult who dominates conversations was once ignored. The woman who hides her feelings was punished for expressing them. Behavior is biography. 16th, people hide uncertainty to avoid collapse. The more rigid someone's worldview, the more fragile their identity. Flexibility is strength. Dogma is fear with a megaphone. 17th, desperation dresses up as independence. I don't need anyone often means I've given up on being chosen. Watch for the people who isolate, not because they're strong, but because they're tired of being hurt. 18th, patterns are confessions. You don't need someone to tell you who they are. Watch their habits, the way they withdraw, how they respond to silence, the people they chase or avoid. Their pattern isn't random. It's a scar replaying. Now, here's the final reflection. Enzy didn't give us these truths so we could manipulate others. He shared them so we could stop confusing noise for honesty, performance for identity, trauma for personality. Once you learn to see these patterns, you'll realize people aren't mysterious. They're exposed if you know where and how to look. Every joke, every compliment, every insult, every silence, it all comes from somewhere. The biggest mistake most people make is thinking behavior is random or worse, logical. But Enzy knew better. He knew people don't speak from logic, they speak from fear. They don't argue because they're confident. They argue because they're scared their belief is all they've got. They don't brag because they're proud, they brag because they're terrified of being overlooked. They don't stay quiet because they're calm, they stay quiet because somewhere in childhood, silence became safety. The real question isn't what someone says, it's why they say it. The person who constantly interrupts, they were once unheard. The guy who mocks emotion, he was taught vulnerability equals weakness. The friend who never asks about your life, they were raised to believe attention is a resource they were never given. And here's the twist, none of this is conscious. They're surviving on autopilot. Behind the sharpest intellect is usually a fear of being seen as dumb. Behind the need to be perfect is guilt that's never named. Behind power, more often than not, is shame. Shame for what they failed to do. Shame for what they became. Shame for the parts of themselves they buried just to get by. But you'll never hear this spoken out loud. You only see it in how they correct others too quickly, how they cling to structure, how they shut down when intimacy enters the room. If you're listening, not just hearing the surface, but decoding the origin of ITOL, understand something most people never do. Behavior isn't a message. It's a cover, a shield built around a wound. And when you stop reacting to the surface and instead start asking, what pain is this protecting? You don't just become more perceptive, you become free, because the world stops feeling personal. The anger, the coldness, the withdrawal, it was never about you, it was about them. It always was. We live in a world of hyper-performance. Everywhere you look online, at work, even in conversations with people you care about, we're always on stage. Every Instagram caption, every "I'm doing great" text, every outfit, every opinion, every delayed reply, that's all a performance. But Enzy saw all this before filters and followers even existed. He wrote, "People don't live as they are. They live as the version of themselves they believe will be accepted." And that's exactly the problem. We think people are hiding from us, but most times they're really hiding from themselves. You see it every day. The man who constantly talks about how strong he is, but really, he's terrified of ever being seen as weak. The woman who posts endless quotes about healing, but hasn't let herself feel anything real in years. The friend who never stops joking because silence reminds him of something he hasn't healed yet. People aren't fake. They're scared that if they drop the act, they'll be abandoned, rejected, or become irrelevant, so they curate their kindness so it can be admired. They weaponize their beliefs to feel powerful. They flaunt their independence to hide the loneliness they won't admit, and here's the most dangerous part, they don't even know they're doing it. You ask someone how they're doing, they smile and say, "I'm good," but their jaw clenches, their shoulders stay tense. Their laugh is just a second of forced. Their eyes flicker when yours don't. They're not lying to deceive you. They're lying to protect the version of themselves they've learned is safe. The strong one, the perfect one, the healer, the unbothered one, the spiritual one, the masculine one, the always in control one, because in a world that rewards image over honesty, telling the truth even to yourself becomes dangerous. But truth leaks anyway. Always. It slips through the cracks of control, in the way someone deflects when the topic gets too close, the way they over-apologize for something minor, the way they laugh too loudly, like volume can mask the cracks underneath. These aren't just quirks, they're confessions in disguise. They're the ego's way of saying, "I don't know how to be seen without being destroyed." And as life piles on, pressure, lost time, expectations, the performance starts to crack. That's when you get the real moment, the sigh they didn't mean to let out, the pause that lasts just a second, too long, the sudden silence after they seem so sure of themselves, the eyes that well up before the sentence even finishes, the breath they take before answering, like they're holding something back. That's not weakness, that's the soul surfacing, if only for a second, because the truest version of a person isn't who they perform to be, it's who they become when they forget to perform. If you're the kind of person who notices these things, if you feel energy shift in a room before anyone says a word, if you catch the moment when someone's mask starts to crack, you're not just observant, you're witnessing a sacred moment, the version of them they haven't even dared to meet, the version they've buried beneath identity, survival, and a desperate need to be accepted. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to understand that reading people isn't about judgment, it's about compassion, because when someone breaks character, they're finally showing you who they really are. There's a moment that happens quietly, suddenly, without warning but never without consequence. Maybe you're sitting in a conversation watching someone complain, posture, or boast, and for the first time, you don't react, you don't take it personally, you don't feel attacked, you don't feel the need to defend yourself, you just see them. The patterns, the tone, the pacing, the way they over-explain, their hollow confidence, their silence that's just too loud, and all at once, it clicks. This isn't about you, it never was about you. The stuff that used to anger you, the coldness, the arrogance, the clinginess, they don't sting the same way anymore. Now, you recognize them for what they really are, wounds wearing armor. It's not weakness, it's survival, dressed up as dominance, silence, or virtue. And when you finally see that, something irreversible happens. Empathy becomes unavoidable, not the sweet performative kind, not the "I understand" for moral points, but the kind born from grief, the kind that comes from knowing just how damn hard it is to be human. Because once you see what people are really running from, once you see the guilt behind the bragging, the fear behind the control, the sadness behind the silence, you stop engaging with the mask, and you start recognizing the pain that built it. That's what Enzy wanted. Not to hand you tools to power over others, not to help you manipulate, but to help you stop being fooled. Because the real danger isn't that people lie, it's that they believe their own lies, and then they expect you to live inside those lies with them. They expect you to respond to the character. They play not the truth behind the role. If you can't see through it, you fall for the theater. You chase validation from people who are deeply insecure. You fear rejection from someone terrified of connection. You feel small next to someone who's secretly falling apart. But when you finally see people clearly, everything changes. You don't flinch at rejection, because now you know it's not truth. It's a wound reflex. You don't get baited by conflict, because drama isn't danger. It's just dysregulation. You don't fall for loud confidence, because loud isn't strength. It's fear. You start reading the situation instead of reacting to the emotion. And in that space, clarity kills confusion. You stop asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" and start wondering what hurts so much inside them that this is how they survive. And in that clarity, anger dies, because you're no longer fighting reality. You're no longer taking someone else's trauma as your truth. You're no longer making their dysfunction your responsibility. You don't get weaker, you become unshakable. Not because you're cold, but because you're finally awake. Awake to the architecture of human behavior. Awake to the patterns behind the personalities, awake to the truth that most people aren't dangerous, they're just scared. And once you see that, you stop needing to fight, you start choosing to understand. Because when you finally see people clearly, manipulation dies, resentment fades, and power returns to you. You were never becoming a reader. You weren't remembering something ancient, something buried. The truth has always been visible. You just weren't taught how to see it. Because no one teaches you that people leak their story in every gesture, in every contradiction. In every contradiction, they try so hard to fill. But now you know, and more importantly now you see. What looked like ego was fear. What felt like rejection was self-protection. What you once took personally was never about you. You're not just reading people now, you're remembering that the patterns were always there. You just needed someone to point them out. And here's the paradox. The clearer you see others, the less you feel the need to defend yourself. What used to confuse you no longer touches you. You don't need to react when you understand. You're not standing above people anymore. You're standing with them, finally seeing what they've been too scared to face. This was never about judgment. It was about waking up to the pain behind the perfection, to the wounds beneath the armor, to the humanity behind the behavior. And if you've ever felt like people didn't get you, like they misread your silence, your strength, your softness, now you know why. They weren't trying to misunderstand you. They were wearing masks too, and people in masks can't see the faces of others. But here's what Enzy understood best. Power isn't about being unreadable. It's about being fully seen, deeply seen, and still being chosen. That's not weakness. That's the highest form of strength. So remember, this you were never truly hidden. They already know who you are. Now, finally, you know it too.